This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Just for the Spell of It with Gary Moss. And I have to say, I'm very, very jealous because here I am in Northeast Ohio. It's cold, it's snowy, it's gray. And in California, well, I heard the temperatures have dropped a little bit.
They're very pleasant as far as I'm concerned because I like the 60s.
Got it.
So
That was
it's
a good, yeah.
sunny and 60. We've had a lot of wind, and the biggest problem, some of my neighbors, not really close to me, but a little farther north, the winds are so strong that Edison has turned off their power
Oh, wow.
for hundreds of thousands of people. Because what happens typically when the wind is that strong, wires get blown down, it sparks fires.
Right.
And when it's this windy and there's a fire, it spreads
Right.
so quickly. So we have our own share of challenges here.
Absolutely.
And, today, we're going to talk about a topic that's called the perfect storm.
Okay.
And we've been experiencing it in so many different ways. The COVID thing, which is all over the place, is a good kind of reference to what the perfect storm is. And if you happen to be in that space of the perfect storm, all of the power that you think you have, you don't have it all. You don't have the power because you're sitting there healthy to make the assumption that you can be okay and step outside your door. And whether you're in the house with snow outside in Cleveland, or I'm inside my house with 60 and sunny outside, when it comes to the COVID storm, we have to be protective wherever we go every single minute, because these incredible numbers of millions of people that have been exposed and have had the virus or have it now, they were just like you and me. They thought everything was cool. And it just boggles my mind when the news on TV shows these groups of people congregating in restaurants, in bars, in parties, even the parties at the White House.
Right.
People aren't wearing masks, but the storm is perfect. And if they want to risk that, but I don't know why they would risk getting the COVID. The people, let's say the percentage of people that are dying from it is small compared to the number of people that got it. But look at the hospitals.
Right.
If you or I were to become sick with the COVID today and required a hospital, we don't even know if there are hospitals available.
Exactly. Or staff.
Or staff. Yeah, the staff is more critical now than even the availability of a bed. But a perfect storm, the concept of that, it can be looked at in so many ways. And of course, I'm thinking about the perfect storm in Scrabble.
Okay.
The perfect storm in Scrabble happens all the time. And sometimes it's fun because you're on the right side of things. And sometimes you're devastated because you're on the other side.
Right.
And it's a luck factor. And some people who come to club and lose again and again and again, um, the luck factor is playing into it, but it's a perfect storm because their opponent has certain things fall in alignment. Um, they have a good combination of tiles on their rack. Um, they know many more words than the newbie who
Right.
walks into the group. Um, they understand all the strategies. They have a bigger vocabulary. They know what to do when they have 3 eyes out of 7 tiles on their rack. And the newbie is still learning these things. And it's the perfect storm. So the more advanced seasoned player scores 400, 500, even 600 points. And the newbie sits there scratching their head and feeling depressed and all of that. And I've seen some people who have come 3, 4, 5 times and then decide, well, I can never win, and they leave. But
Right.
they still have that Scrabble hunger. They always enjoyed the game, and they don't enjoy losing, and especially being humiliated to some point because they can't even put up a baby fight.
Right. Exactly.
And what I know in my heart of hearts that um, all it takes is some time to bring yourself up to speed. And oh, here's part of a perfect storm. Um, the new person comes into club and is warmly greeted by everybody. And sometimes they'll take me aside and they'll say, can I play some of the weaker players? Well, the first game in my club is sort of a random pairing. Uh, I make a scorecard for all the players, their names on one side. I put names face down, fan out the scorecards, and I go up to someone just by random and ask them to pick one of them.
Okay.
And whoever they pick is who they play in the first game. And I take a little bit of the prerogative as director to take the newbie and put them with one of the weaker players without having to draw. And sometimes I'll put them with me, even though I'm not the weakest player in the club. And I'll do it because I'll have a teaching lesson with
Okay.
with the newbie. And sometimes they're um, put off when I suggest that because they really think in their mind because they beat all of their friends and all
Sure.
of their relatives that they're going to be just great. So they think in their mind that they are great and they don't want any charity of playing an open
Sure.
game. And I let that decide for me where I'm going to help place them. So then the games get started, and very quickly they learn what they don't know. Uh, any of us, we don't know what we don't know until
It happened.
all of a sudden we learn something
Right.
and we say, oh, I didn't know that. But 2 minutes earlier, we didn't know that. So I like using that phrase, don't know what I don't know, because it's so true all the time.
Exactly.
I see things on TV. I read things in books. Uh, my wife tells me something that she just learned, that I don't know. And so now I know it. And when it comes to Scrabble, now that I know it, I can use that, especially against somebody that I think might not know that.
Okay, sure.
When I'm studying words, I like to study some words that I'm learning on the spot by picking them randomly out of the dictionary. And I look for words that I've never heard or seen before. I'm always surprised because, like so many people, I think I know a lot. But when you stop and think that the dictionary that we use playing Scrabble is over 170,000 words, the average person on the street has a vocabulary of 8,500 words. What
Just
is
a
that?
fraction.
That's 1/20th.
Yeah,
It's 5% of the words that are in the Scrabble dictionary. And then the Scrabble dictionary is only a fraction of the number of words spoken on the planet. There might be 1,000,000 words spoken on the
sure.
planet in different languages. And just because it's a different language doesn't mean it's not on our list. Our list is a combination of words that are chosen by a committee. And they've picked foreign words that some of which are used in our um, English conversation all the time. And some of the words reflect things from other cultures
Right,
um, that we want to know about. For instance, monetary units that I've talked about before. When you're talking about monetary units in England, we have to talk about the pound and the shilling and, words like that. So they'll show up in our dictionary.
sure.
When you talk about certain animals that are only on other continents, we'll talk about the kangaroo and the uh, duck-billed platypus and other things like that that exist. So those words are in our dictionary. And there are a lot of lesser known animals, lesser known monetary
Right,
units. So sometimes those are the kind of words that I'll choose to put in my memory so that if the opportunity's there, you or whoever my opponent is may not know them.
right.
And that's part of what I call a perfect storm in Scrabble. Um, so now I want to go about building a perfect storm.
Okay,
One of the things, in assuming that I'm talking with someone who's new to the game at the club level, um, first of all, I have to help them overcome looking at the words that are played on the board and saying, no, that's not a word, or we don't play that way. They'll
right,
frequently say, we only play words that you know. Or another thing they'll say all the time, well, you can't play a word unless you know what it means. Well, hopefully, I do know what some of those stranger words mean, and I'll come back at them. Oh, that's a monetary unit from uh, Zambia. And they'll look at me, oh, how do you know that? Well, it's in the dictionary, and I looked in the dictionary. So I said, would you like to double check and look in the dictionary for that word? And they're always astonished when I know the word. So I honestly, I don't know the meanings of many of the words
sure.
I play because I'm interested in playing words. And some people tell me I can't learn a word unless I know what it means. Well, number one, that's not true. Maybe that's been your practice up until now. And maybe you've done a good job convincing yourself that you can't remember words unless you know what they mean. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just basically not true. If you want to learn the methods that Scrabble players learn words, then you will enable yourself to expand your vocabulary, your Scrabble vocabulary, much more than it is now.
Well, don't you think that goes back to basically when we were in grammar school and when you got your spelling list, not only did you have to spell it, but you had to put it in a sentence, you know, or you had to give the definition of it.
Oh,
So,
sure.
so I
And
think that's
that
kind
makes full sense because it's learning words in a particular
right,
atmosphere
right,
where you want to know what those words are. And we would use it in a sentence, and we might use it later in an article that we might write
right.
for an assignment. And so learning words like that, um, it's perfectly fine. But if you are the average person on the street that knows 8,500 words, can you imagine having to learn another 8,500 words plus their definitions? So it seems like double the work.
Right.
Learn all these new words, but then learn what all these words mean.
Sure.
And so the challenge becomes exponential because you have so many things to do.
Absolutely.
Now, let's just think for a minute. How many words do you think the Club Scrabble player knows in terms of percentage? If the average person walking in the door, never playing before, knows 5%, what is a likely percentage that the Club Scrabble player knows?
I would think a high scoring club Scrabble player probably knows about 20%.
Mhm. I think you're in the ballpark there, something like 20, 25%. And there are some people, and I've met three of them, who, and I'm sure there are more out there, who claim to know 100%. And I may have told this story before of my friend Mark Landsberg. Mark, not too long ago, turned 80 years old. He's been playing Scrabble since the first sets were sold
Wow.
in the
Okay.
1950s. In the 1960s, he found himself having a job as a night clerk in a hotel. And during that time, most of the time, Mark was sitting there waiting with nothing to do
Sure.
until the next person walked in the door. And Mark used that time to study Scrabble words,
Interesting.
and not just to study, like open the dictionary and read starting with the A's and the B's, but Mark is a very intelligent guy, and he looked for um, different clues on how he might remember these words. And he might look at all the words that began with cat,
Okay.
all the words that began with dog, all the words that could be made out of sets of high probability tiles. Most people don't think that way,
No.
but here you have a guy with a lot of time on his hands that he needs to fill. He likes the game of Scrabble, and he was looking for an advantage. And I'm sure he was one of the first people to think about the idea of stems, recognizing which letters are used most often in large numbers of words. And he discovered that the word satire, S-A-T-I-R-E, those are all high probability letters. And then he took those 6 and added the variable of another A, or those 6 with a B, those 6 with a C. And all of a sudden, he discovered a method of learning that I don't know if it was ever used before. Maybe it was used by coders uh, in World War II, where the Navajo Indians used their language to send messages because the people in Germany didn't know Navajo.
Okay.
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 So now this idea of satire was like a Scrabble code. And with the variables, satire A is atresia, satire B is barites. He learned these. And from satire, he could come up with 70 bingos. And when you play all 7 tiles, you get a 50-point bonus.
Right.
So now Mark goes and sits down with other people who think they're hot stuff and they know how to play. And here he is playing all of these bingos. And they're saying, how did you do that? Well, at the beginning, maybe he didn't tell them the tricks.
Sure.
But after a while, he became a teacher and taught other Scrabble players how to do it. Now, knowing how to do it and doing it are 2 different things.
Right.
For 30 years, I have been teaching other Scrabble players the tricks of Scrabble champions. And over 30 years, I've put it into a learning system because my background's a teacher and I like systems to study. And so I've put these stems together and I've put them on flashcards, I've put them on bookmarks, I've put them on lists, I've used them every which way I can. And the reason that I'm willing to teach you how to use the STEM is the greatest learning experience is held by a teacher who's teaching it. When you give things away, they come back at you
Right.
tenfold.
Right.
All right. So here I have been teaching these things, but you know what? A lot of people who have paid me to tutor them, a lot of people who have purchased my flashcards, they've purchased my bookmarks, they get them, it's a novelty, they spend a week, they spend 2 weeks with them, and now they're tired of it. They put it on the side and they have all this information, but they haven't learned it. They
Right.
haven't mastered it. And when it becomes starting to get hard, let's say they've learned 4 of the 26 flashcards, now they become a little exhausted or a little bit down in attitude. I can't do this, which is not true, by the way, but they've talked themselves in because it lets them off the hook and they put it aside. And now, even though they know that satire can create bingos, they get it on their rack, and they've learned that satine E is Etesian. They can't remember it. Now, how frustrating is that? You studied the stem, but you haven't mastered it, and now you have it on your rack, and so you try to figure it out, and you'll play off El Satan. Well, El Satan's not a word,
Right.
but Etesian is a
Yeah.
word.
You know,
Okay.
it's interesting as you've discussed these in the past and you bring it out again. Um, I didn't like going to school. And the reason I didn't like going to school, I didn't feel like I was learning or was as smart as my classmates. And I didn't understand the concept truly of how to study. Okay. When a teacher would say, make a flashcard, I would put so much information on that flashcard that it was like reading the textbook. Didn't
Yeah.
help. And so when you talk about getting exhausted, I got exhausted. But the more you've talked about these things, I just keep putting these things into place on other things that I want to learn
Mhm.
because learning really is fun. It's like a big puzzle.
Mhm.
And it's sad to me that so many of our kids do go to school and they are bored and they don't get as much out of it because they don't know the tricks of the trade.
I have every time I teach this, I sort of go down into a deeper level of understanding. And so if you as the parent are teaching your child, if you as the teacher are teaching your student, you try to identify something that will spark their excitement. Um, they know that you want them to get an A in their history, but they're not really into history. If you can find the story in the lesson, maybe that'll get them excited. If they're always with the gadgets, with the video games, maybe there's an opportunity using the computer. So let's say the younger people have a level of interest as long as it can be the computer. So now take the idea of flashcards and then take the idea of PowerPoint on the computer, and you teach them how to use PowerPoint. You teach them how to make a flashcard. You teach them how to whittle down the information. So on one side, you put 76, and on the other side, you put the American Revolution, or you put something that
Right.
relates
Flex
to it.
to it. Yep.
But they're now doing it because they like the computer. And so to have more computer time, they're willing to sit there and make these flashcards. Same thing with mathematics. Same thing with the periodical chart for
Right.
chemistry. Uh, you sort of widen their view of how they can learn this, and then encourage them to find their own systems that make it easier to learn. One of the things when you and I were going to school is we all learned it the same way.
Right.
Uh, it was expected of us to learn it the same way. But as you're teaching this to different people, you'll learn that this person learns better by reading it. This person learns it by listening to it. Now, there have been Scrabble players in the past who learned by listening, and they took all of these stems that I'm talking about and they put it on tape. They spoke the letter combination and then paused and then spoke the answers. And it doesn't work that way for me. I've seen and I've owned the tapes and I've listened to them, but it puts me to sleep. Uh, I know that flashcards work for me,
Sure.
and it's very possible and maybe very likely that there's another set of people that it doesn't work for. I'm thinking of people that are dyslexic. Flashcards may be a waste of time for them. And maybe they've learned a way dealing with their dyslexia because those people still read, but maybe they have to make the flashcards differently in a way that I don't know. I've had several friends over the years that are legally blind and play Scrabble. They apparently have their own way of dealing with this. And again, I may have told the story of being a volunteer going to a tournament of blind people
Right.
playing
Yeah.
Scrabble. And that was several years ago. And I just found it amazing. And who would even think that? That blind people could play. And along came somebody who created a perfect storm that tapped into the abilities and then the tools to create that for blind people. And I know those opportunities still exist out there.
So there's always an opportunity for all of us. And sometimes we have to create it ourselves because we know how we think the best, how we retain information.
Yep. Um, I'll talk to the point of my friend who passed away a year ago, Maliha Mahmood. Here she was from the Philippines, English being her second language. She had many, many things that she liked to do. One of the things was botany, growing flowers, growing trees. She learned how to splice fruit trees together so that on one side uh, she's growing apples and on the other side it's producing pears.
Wow.
And here I bring her into the club Scrabble world. Well, she struggled a lot when she first began. I remember when she first started coming, most other people would come 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks. And if they didn't feel gratified that they were learning or whatever, after 4 weeks of learning, for losing
Yeah.
4 games every week, uh, we would never see or hear from them again.
Sure.
Not because we didn't want them to come. They were a little bit ashamed and a little bit downhearted because they couldn't compete at our level. But that was, again, about attitude, because I would take them under my wing and try to show them everything. And sometimes, if they were still a working person, they didn't have enough time to
Right.
devote to learning Scrabble things. Not that it takes all that time. It depends if you know what to work at and if you go in an organized manner. if I said to you, Karen, what you need to do is learn the twos, and then left you at your own on how to accomplish that. And then on the other hand, I have this other person here, and I would show them the steps that you need to take and the order in which to take them to become good and then to master the two-letter words. They could probably do it in a month, and it might take you many, many more weeks to do it.
Right.
Well, at the beginning, um, Maliha was doing this on her own. She hadn't come to me, even though I'm sure I must have offered it to her. Maliha came months and months and years. I think it wasn't until the second or third year till she had her first win. She was amazing. And all of the time, she would come up to me and tell me how much she had been learning along the way, but it wasn't that organized. And finally, she came to me and she said she wanted my help. And I started working with her as a student and giving her certain things to do and challenging her. And she was able to find the time, and she started to get better. And uh, she had been doing this close to 20 years, and
Wow.
she was a good player at the end. For many years, she had been getting one, two, or more bingos per evening playing at club. But I started out talking about her interest in botany. She ended up going through the dictionary and finding every word in the Scrabble dictionary that is a flower or had something to do with botany. And she published a book.
Oh, how wonderful.
And, and she, it's on shelves. It has an ESPN number. Uh, and then when she was finished with that, she became interested in very long words, words that are 16 letters long or longer. And I don't know how much time it took. I can imagine it took several years, but she compiled a book of words that is called World Judge. And it is actually accepted and used on the world tournament level of
Wow.
Scrabble. Uh, it's an official Scrabble dictionary, and it's beyond just the words that we use here in the States. It includes the words that are used in world competition, which is the Collins dictionary, which is used primarily in England, South Africa, Australia. And here, this little lady from the Philippines put her energy and efforts, and she created that perfect storm. Um, One of the things that she hadn't completed and she was working on, one of the languages in the Philippines is Tagalog. And she wanted to bring Scrabble to the people that use that language. And so she was compiling a dictionary using Tagalog. And she hadn't completed it yet. But what, just imagine how more difficult that would be for someone who didn't have a language
Right.
that was right here. I always found her so amazing.
Well, and also what is amazing is she was coming to club, it sounds like, to learn. Okay.
Yeah,
Um, it winning obviously is always a lot of fun and it makes you feel like, hey, I've succeeded, like everything I've learned. But also, if you can go there with that open mind too, like she obviously was, I'm going to go and I'm going to learn and I'm going to get better each time. And it's going to take me whatever it takes me.
right.
And she obviously felt comfortable amongst the other club members as well.
Well, I think most people will make you feel comfortable. There might be one or two who don't reach out to others, but for the most part, I've traveled cross country many times, stopping at Scrabble clubs, and I've found people to be very welcoming and very inclusive, and people are very willing to teach you. But here's a warning that I've put out there: don't cultivate a nice person to be your teacher. If they're nice, fine, go out to coffee, invite them over for dinner. But when you're talking about learning Scrabble, you want to learn a way that's going to be productive. So you can usually trust your Scrabble director, or you can look for someone like me who's been teaching Scrabble and been out there and has sort of made the path um, more direct for you to get to your goal. Uh, I've wasted a lot of time trying out many things. And still, I always remember that just because it didn't work for me, it could work for you.
Right.
And I try to remember that when I'm working with people. I kind of check out their personality, their style of learning, and try to create a fit between certain styles and certain tools that I've created. And it works for a lot of folks. Most of my teaching these days um, are online through Scrabble 101, and I'm able to teach people from all over the country.
Right.
I've had students from Florida and Texas and New York State and Michigan, and my name gets passed around by former students. Um, in terms of the perfect storm, when you're the student in the class, all the components of the storm are right there. And sometimes I see people taking them on, making some advancement for themselves. But here's what happens frequently. Um, the first lesson in the 21 days is with the twos. Now, even though that's a 1 day lesson, no one's going to go from knowing 0 twos to
Right.
107 twos in 1 day. So I provide each lesson in a format so you can print it out and you can keep it so you can go back to it, whether it's a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now. You might have to update the list, but you have a method, a process for learning these words. So someone gets the 2 letter word list, and in a month's time, they become a master of the twos. Well, because you're a master of the twos, you're not yet a master of the game. To master the game, there are about 18 components which you have to give some attention to. You may not be the master of all 18, but you have to be the master of more than one to be able to cut yourself free and say, okay, I know it now. And you go back to club to, show how good you are.
Right.
Knowing the twos permits you to take words that you find on your rack and hook them onto things that are already on the board. So when you're able to do that, you move from here like 10 steps forward. That's an important first step. But there are all the other things to make you into a cyclone, to make you into a hurricane, so that you can sweep away your opponent with all the things that you know.
Well, those are all great tips, but I want you to give another tip today because it is the holidays.
Okay.
And, a lot of things aren't really accessible in the stores because they're not being shipped. But you have a perfect gift, your name plaque.
Okay. I'm very proud of the name plaque. I put it together about 20 years ago. And what the name plaque is, the name of the person is at the top. I prefer having a middle name included because the more letters I have in the person's name, I can then dissect it. And I look at all the letters and I use only the letters in the person's name and then create a word list. And then on the plaque, I'll create anywhere from 60 to 75 words from the word list that I've created. And I'll use many of the highest scoring words in terms of their face value. And then any word lover would love to have this. I've seen it hanging in people's offices, sitting on coffee tables in people's homes. It sells for $29.95 plus shipping. And the way you get it is you send me an email, you tell me you're interested, you give me your phone number, you give me the recipient's name, and use a middle name if you know it. It's not, if you don't know the middle name or don't want to use it, you don't have to. And that's the way you do it. Today, here, as we're talking, it's December 3rd. If you want it for a Christmas gift, if I were to get your request today, I could probably do it by tomorrow. And I don't know how bad the mail is, but I could get it off to you very quickly. And so I invite you to request it. I've made it for holiday gifts. I've made it for birthdays. I've made it in the name of newborn children. Uh, it's good for all occasions.
Absolutely. And, this is a great time to support each other. And like I said, I work retail on the weekend and I see that there's almost no product. There have been many times I felt like saying to somebody, if you want a gift, I have this great gift idea. I'm not allowed to do that. So we'll do it on this program, and I will make sure that we have Gary's email address in the description of today's show. And, let's all stay safe, wear your mask, and if we can get this vaccine out and everybody healthy again, hopefully maybe by second quarter of 2021, we can be playing Scrabble at club level.
Oh, we sure hope so, because we didn't realize how important that was in our lives. And some of us are just starving for a good Scrabble game.
I'm sure. Well, again, thanks very much, and we will talk to you again next week. Have a good
Okay.
one.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Bye-bye.